When these ladies were in their 20s, reaching 60 was considered quite an accomplishment. Now life expectancy in China is 73, and in terms of cash, they're also fortunate, because as former urban state workers, they're among a privileged minority of Chinese that receive a public pension and insurance cover.
I am
diabetic. Because I have the national medical insurance, which covers 14 big diseases, I don't have any pressure. It covers my whole year's treatment.
But 7 in every 10 mainland Chinese, mainly in the vast countryside, have no safety net. Only savings or family support to fall back on when they're old or sick. And the government's task to try and redress this imbalance, which ferments social instability, is getting harder by the day. China is getting older, rapidly, because living standards have greatly improved since the 1970s. By 2050, there'll be more elderly Chinese than today's entire US population, with over 100 million aged 80 or over. And just look at the youth numbers. For the economy, this means fewer workers down the line. Come 2015, the workforce will start shrinking, and this is a direct consequence of the one-child policy introduced in 1978.
We are going to see a country whose working population was among the most rapidly growing in the world for the last 30 years convert itself into a country whose working population will be among the most rapidly contracting in the world.
And this has huge implications for China's competitiveness, not to mention its ability to finance credible welfare provisions. Although China is now the world's third largest economy, with per capita income that has risen more than tenfold since the 1970s, it's still very much a developing country. Unlike the income levels of other aging countries, it's all happening to a Chinese population that's still poor. Over 100 million people here live on less than $1 a day. How the government navigates this demographic transformation will influence the country's future prosperity and stability. So what are the options? There are growing calls to scrap China's controversial family planning rules, and so expand the next generation of taxpayers that the economy will depend on. But in the near term, this is also problematic.
The problem is, of course, that babies don't become workers for 20 years. And so we end up with a much worse dependency problem and much heavier expenditure.
What's remarkable, if not troubling, is that the seriousness of China's ageing problem doesn't register with the public at large, and is rarely discussed in the state-run media, which trumpets instead how government policies make everyone better off. So most urban employees in their 40s and above expect the status quo to continue, or at least improve, which means leaving the workplace before 60 on modest but adequate benefits, then dote on their only grandchild.
In the past, because there was no birth control policies, there were too many children. Life was too difficult. Now there are less of us in the family. Our living standard is better.
Her son knows little about the pension time bomb, but like many young parents, he won't trust in the state to provide for his retirement. He's one in a new, growing breed of Chinese consumers that buys private insurance.
Our generation thinks about how to work, to pay for pensions and insurance, so that when we retire, we can have a good life.
Private insurance annual premiums now top $55 billion US, with the industry growing by over 20% annually. Foreign companies are established in the country's mature metropolises like Beijing and Shanghai. A rapid development of the private sector, including capital markets reform, would help support the future needs of those with disposable income. But a strong state retirement scheme is still a must. The trouble today, however, is that China's basic urban pension scheme also covers the underfunded obligations of shuttered state-run factories. According to a World Bank report, these payments swallow up almost half of today's contributions. As China ages, the country's pay-as-you-go pension system in its present form is in danger of collapse. As policymakers consider changes, including a fully funded urban scheme linked to individuals' contributions, they're also evaluating new policies for the countryside. Over 90% of the rural elderly have no pension. They rely on their children for support, many of whom work away as migrants.
The urban areas have the state retirement insurance, but the rural communities don't. The government's new rural retirement policy treats both urban and rural as equal.
In trials across the country, officials are encouraging locals to start contributing to a state retirement plan. And for the elderly, the government is rolling out a non-contributory pension with a payment of between $8 and $12 per month. The thinking is, if this pension handout is spent, not hoarded, it'll help boost the local economy. In the cities, there's already a market serving grey consumers. Centenarian Tan Shitai and his 90-year-old wife live in this retirement home on the outskirts of Chongqing. A generation ago, this would have been taboo, as the elderly would live with their children or grandchildren. But the one-child policy weakened China's traditional family support networks. And so now, more and more retirees with pensions are opting to live with folk their own age.
The increase in the number of elderly creates a new consumer group and helps develop a new service industry that focuses on the needs of the elderly.
So ageing may present some industries with clear growth opportunities, but of course, only if there's someone to pay for it. For the country at large, the political and macroeconomic challenges are huge. So much so that China could be on the brink of a new era of slower growth and mounting social stress.